In the year 2000, the New Orleans Saints were a franchise desperately searching for an identity. They had just finished another disappointing season, and their starting quarterback situation was, to put it mildly, a mess. But sometimes, the answer to your problems is sitting right there on your bench. Sometimes, all it takes is one opportunity to change everything. This is the story of Aaron Brooks, a quarterback who went from unknown backup to franchise leader, from statistical marvel to cautionary tale. Aaron Brooks wasn't supposed to be a starting NFL quarterback. He was a fourth-round pick, a developmental project, a guy who was meant to hold clipboards and learn the system. But for 5 seasons in New Orleans, he was the most exciting thing to happen to Saints football in decades. So how did a backup from the University of Virginia become one of the most productive quarterbacks of the early 2000s? And why, despite putting up numbers that would make modern NFL fans do a double take, is Aaron Brooks barely remembered today? Aaron Brooks was born on March 24, 1976, in Newport News, Virginia. From an early age, it was clear that Aaron had something special, not just athletically but mentally. At Bethel High School, Brooks was a 3-sport athlete, excelling in football, basketball, and track. But it was on the football field where he truly shined, displaying the kind of dual-threat ability that was just beginning to revolutionize the quarterback position. Brooks committed to the University of Virginia, where he would play under head coach George Welsh. Now, Virginia wasn't exactly known as a quarterback factory in the 1990s, but Brooks would change that perception. In his senior season, 1998, Brooks threw for 2,581 yards and 20 touchdowns while adding another 294 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. More importantly, he led Virginia to an 8-4 record and a bowl game appearance. But when the 1999 NFL draft rolled around, Brooks wasn't exactly lighting up draft boards. He was seen as a project, athletic, sure, but raw. The Green Bay Packers selected him in the 4th round, 131st overall. In Green Bay, Brooks was buried on the depth chart behind Brett Favre and backup Matt Hasselbeck. He spent his rookie season learning, watching, and waiting for an opportunity that seemed like it might never come. Meanwhile, down in New Orleans, the Saints were in quarterback purgatory. They had cycled through Jeff Blake, Billy Joe Tolliver, and Kerry Collins, and none of them had provided the spark the franchise desperately needed. New head coach Jim Haslett and general manager Randy Mueller were looking for answers anywhere they could find them. And in March of 2000, they found one in an unlikely place, Green Bay's bench. The Saints traded a 3rd-round pick to the Packers for Aaron Brooks. It was the kind of trade that barely registered on the national radar. A 3rd-round pick for a backup quarterback who had thrown exactly 0 NFL passes? Most people shrugged and moved on. But the Saints saw something in Brooks that others had missed. His mobility, his arm strength, his ability to extend plays. These were exactly the kinds of traits that could breathe life into their struggling offense. Brooks arrived in New Orleans with something to prove. He wasn't content to be a clipboard holder anymore. He wanted to play, and he was willing to work for it. The Saints started the 2000 season with veteran Jeff Blake under center, but it quickly became clear that Blake wasn't the answer. After a 1-3 start, coach Jim Haslett made a decision that would define the next half-decade of Saints football. On October 8, 2000, against the San Francisco 49ers, Aaron Brooks started his first NFL game. Brooks' first start was, well, let's just say it was memorable. He completed 15 of 33 passes for 191 yards, with 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions in a 28-21 loss to San Francisco. But there was something different about Brooks, something that previous Saints quarterbacks had lacked. There was electricity, unpredictability, the sense that something spectacular could happen at any moment. Brooks wasn't just a pocket passer, he was a playmaker. He could escape pressure, extend plays, and make throws that other quarterbacks couldn't even attempt. In his first season as a starter, playing in 12 games, Brooks threw for 2,602 yards and 17 touchdowns with 16 interceptions. He also rushed for 252 yards and 3 touchdowns. The numbers weren't spectacular, but they showed promise. More importantly, Saints fans were excited about their quarterback for the first time in years. Brooks brought an energy and charisma that had been missing from the position. The 2001 season was when Brooks really announced himself to the NFL world. He threw for 3,832 yards, the first Saints quarterback to ever throw for more than 3,800 yards in a season. Brooks had 26 touchdown passes that season, along with 22 interceptions. Those interceptions were concerning, but the touchdowns were spectacular. This was a quarterback who wasn't afraid to take chances. Brooks had weapons around him. Joe Horn was becoming one of the NFL's elite receivers, and rookie running back Deuce McAllister was providing a ground game that complemented Brooks' aerial attack perfectly. To put Brooks' 2001 season in perspective, his 3,832 passing yards ranked 5th in the NFL that season. He was in the company of Brett Favre, Peyton Manning, and Kurt Warner. Not bad for a 4th-round pick in just his 2nd season as a starter. The 2002 season was when everything came together for Aaron Brooks and the New Orleans Saints. This was the year that Brooks established himself as one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the NFL. Brooks threw for 3,572 yards and 27 touchdowns in 2002, but more importantly, he led the Saints to their first playoff appearance since 1992. After a decade in the wilderness, New Orleans was relevant again. In the wild card round against Minnesota, Brooks threw for 226 yards and 2 touchdowns in a 31-28 victory. It was the Saints' first playoff win in franchise history, and Brooks was the man who delivered it. The celebration in New Orleans was unlike anything the city had ever seen for a football team. For the first time, the Saints weren't just participants in the NFL, they were contenders. The 2003 season saw Brooks continue his upward trajectory. He threw for 3,546 yards and 24 touchdowns, and while the Saints didn't make the playoffs, Brooks was establishing himself as a legitimate franchise quarterback. By the end of 2003, Brooks had thrown for over 11,000 yards in just 4 seasons as a starter. He had 68 touchdown passes and was averaging over 3,500 yards per season. These weren't just good numbers for the Saints, these were good numbers, period. But it was the 2004 season where Brooks reached his absolute peak. This was the year of the River City Relay, one of the most spectacular finishes in NFL history. With 7 seconds left against Jacksonville, down 20-13, Brooks completed a pass to Jerome Pathan, who lateraled to Michael Lewis, who ran it back for what appeared to be a game-tying touchdown. The extra point was blocked, but the play became legendary. That play exemplified everything Brooks brought to the Saints: excitement, unpredictability, and the ability to create magic out of chaos. Brooks finished 2004 with 3,810 yards and 21 touchdowns. He also rushed for 586 yards, the most by a Saints quarterback since Archie Manning in 1978. But by 2005, the cracks in Brooks' game were becoming harder to ignore. The interceptions, which had always been a problem, were getting worse. Brooks threw 22 interceptions that season, tied for the most in the NFL. Brooks had always been a gunslinger, but now his confidence was bordering on recklessness. He was forcing throws into coverage, trying to make plays that simply weren't there. And then Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in August 2005, displacing the Saints and changing everything about the organization and the city. The Saints were forced to play their home games in Baton Rouge and San Antonio. The team was scattered, the city was devastated, and Brooks was trying to lead a football team through circumstances that no quarterback had ever faced. After the 2005 season, the Saints hired Sean Payton as their new head coach. Payton had been the offensive coordinator in Dallas and had worked with players like Drew Bledsoe and Tony Romo. Initially, it seemed like Payton and Brooks might be a good fit. Payton was an offensive innovator, and Brooks was a talented quarterback entering what should have been his prime years. But from the beginning of the 2006 season, something felt different. Brooks looked uncomfortable in Payton's system, and his decision-making seemed to be getting worse rather than better. The 2006 season was a disaster for Brooks personally. He threw 18 interceptions to just 11 touchdowns in 10 starts before being benched in favor of Drew Brees. Yes, that Drew Brees, who the Saints had signed as a free agent. Wait, you might be asking, Drew Brees? When did he get involved in this story? Well, that's where things get complicated. The Saints had actually signed Drew Brees as a free agent in March 2006, coming off his shoulder injury with San Diego. The plan initially was for Brees to compete with Brooks for the starting job. But as the 2006 season progressed, it became clear that Brees was the better quarterback. Brooks was relegated to backup duty, watching from the sideline as Brees led the Saints to new heights. Under Brees, the Saints went 10-6 and made the playoffs. They reached the NFC Championship game, something that had never happened in franchise history. After the season, the Saints released Brooks. He signed with the Oakland Raiders, hoping to revive his career. But Brooks never recaptured his New Orleans magic. He started 8 games for Oakland in 2007, throwing 8 touchdowns and 11 interceptions before being benched again. Brooks attempted comebacks with several teams over the next few years, but his NFL career was essentially over. He finished with 19,156 passing yards, 123 touchdowns, and 92 interceptions. So why don't we remember Aaron Brooks? Why isn't he mentioned alongside the great Saints quarterbacks of all time? The truth is, Brooks was a victim of timing and circumstances. He was a mobile quarterback in an era that hadn't fully embraced mobile quarterbacks. He was a high-volume passer before high-volume passing became the norm. In today's NFL, a quarterback throwing for 3,800 yards and 26 touchdowns would be considered good. maybe even very good. But in the early 2000s, those numbers were exceptional. Aaron Brooks gave Saints fans 5 years of excitement, hope, and genuine belief that their team could compete at the highest level. He was the bridge between the dark ages and the championship era. Without Aaron Brooks proving that the Saints could be relevant, would Drew Brees have signed with New Orleans? Would Sean Payton have taken the coaching job? Would the Saints have ever won their Super Bowl? Maybe Aaron Brooks wasn't the quarterback who brought a championship to New Orleans, but he was the quarterback who made Saints fans believe that a championship was possible. And sometimes that's just as important. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys. Hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and stay safe.